that you might be looking for some kind of validation for your life. And so, that's kind of what I think, what I discovered in that experience is that, the will that it took to get all this put together, and all the people that were behind the scenes, and all, going back and forth with the French government to make this happen, we really had to make it count in every way possible. And, you realize you're like, there's this is a moment that is going to stick with you forever. And so I'm really glad that we were able to capture it the way we did. So that, to me, the word haunted is sort of like just something that, like, it's part of you, almost possessed.
Wow.
In a way.
Yeah.
And I want to talk more about like the experience of actually being in the catacombs, but talking about the journey to get there in the first place. I mean, it sounds like this is something that you as a group have been wanting to do for over 20 years. So what was like, how did you convince Paris to allow it to happen?
Well, with the Queens, we've been spending a lot of time in France over the last couple decades, and there's definitely a connection that we have with the country, and also the city of Paris. By proxy, there's the experience with, the Eagles of Death Metal and the Bataclan, which, that sort of permeates our world too, because, those are our brothers. And, it was such a huge world event that, that we all kind of like went through together in some ways. And, over the past couple decades, we've been building our audience there and spending more and more time there. And I mean, I just love France, and I think that helped, but it's really about persistence. And, also over the last couple of decades, we've been trying to play different places that are, not your general sort of arena or theater. Of course, we like playing old theaters that have been around for 100 years. You always get going back to the sort of haunted thing, you get a vibe from places that are like that. We played this Roman cathedral, not a cathedral, sorry, a amphitheater in Leeuwen, and that was amazing because you're like, well, it's this stone like monument to theater and music, and it's been there for probably 1,000 years. So we want to play more places like that that gives us something to feel different about, and maybe makes us perform a little differently or more intensely. And so the Catacombs took the cake, though, out of all these places that we played, because there's nothing like it, and we had to pick certain songs, and we had to shrink down, our production. Basically it was acoustic instruments and a car battery for the electric piano.
Yeah,
since there's no electricity down there.
And I mean, I hear you talking about all these different places and how that can affect the performance. And yeah, I mean, specifically to the Catacombs, can you just describe, if it's possible, that energy that you felt? Like maybe when you first got down there, you first setting up, or maybe once you start performing, what did it feel like?
So yeah, we took like the tour the day before just to kind of get get an idea of how it's all going to work. And just that tour alone, I was like, whoa, what are we doing here? So yeah, it sort of goes to the ability for people to maneuver and adapt to something like that, because, we had our sound engineer that mixes our records and does our records with us as well, Mark Rankin. And so he had to think on the fly as well. You know, we had to use these little battery operated microphones that were clipped on. And so there was a lot of technical sort of stuff that had to be sorted really fast. And the French film crew were really able to move, you know, fast too, and like adapt. So it was a real pleasure to kind of watch that process, you know, happen at the moment, and then here we are almost a year later, and getting to see the final product. It just transported me right back to being there. So it's a pretty incredible experience.
Yeah.
I forgot what the question was, but I just started talking.
Hey, it's okay. We'll get back to it. I mean, we were talking about like the energy in the catacombs themselves. Yeah. And what I love so much about the final product is that you can actually like hear the sound of the space, like the drips from the ceiling, and like it's kind of part of the music and part of everything. So how did your decision with what you decided to play, what instruments you decided to play, kind of like, how did you make that decision with the space that already has its own sound too?
Well, we kind of had a little bit of an idea. I had never been in the catacombs before that, so I know that a few people in the band have. So there was an idea that we were definitely going to have to strip it down, and in order to fit in that space, you know, you realize that the catacombs itself is like this main character of the whole, you know, film. And so it was sort of dictating what, you know, us playing more melancholy, sort of vulnerable songs off of our records. And so we kind of went in thinking that was the best idea, which turned out to be great. But yeah, it's bizarre because we played a song called Running Joke, which is basically a song we've had for a couple decades that we've tried to record, and we've done like instrumentals of it and B-sides of it that not many people have heard. And it was really interesting to cut that with a newer song, Paper Machete. So there was like a medley of those two songs, which bizarrely worked somehow. And so, you know, I think we're sort of blessed in a way that we are able to get that creative and you know, look at our music from a different angle when it's like, oh, well, the strings can play all this other stuff, and we just need a rhythm acoustic guitar. So that was kind of freeing in a way, because the string section was so good. And also very adaptable, because during the rehearsals, we're like, hey, try this note, and maybe we could do this. And they were very easily, you know, malleable to like what we were hearing in our heads. And yeah, it was a really nice experience to kind of like see and hear our music more orchestrated.
I remember like the weeping of the strings, like the way that they were able to make it like almost sound like a drip or like a tear almost. It was beautiful.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. And we were super pleased with how all of their performance turned out, you know, and we just seemed to jive. It was a really, really pleasant experience.
That's cool.
Talking about the chain?
Yeah.
Like that was cool.
Yeah, that's right.
Chain?
The chain, the sound of the chain in there as well.
So, yeah, I mean, you would think that, you know, well, I've never played in a hall of bones before, so you don't know how it's going to sound in there. And turns out it's not a very reflective surface. And so these places that you're seeing us play, the ceilings are really low and it's pretty tight. And so we really did lean into like the way things sound in that room. And the chain was this really bizarre sound, you know, that I thought was super cool. And so, yeah, we were basically thinking like, well, we can't bring drums, we can't bring anything very loud, you know, and something like that becomes really effective when everybody's just performing acoustically.
That's very cool. Was there a moment when, the weight of the history of the space, as well as the history that you were making, kind of hit you, or you kind of realized like how special a thing this was? Was there a certain song while you were playing it and you realized like, wow, this is really something special?
Well, I mean, that thought ran through my head probably once every 20 minutes. But really, it was the first song, which is Running Joke and Paper Machete. That was the first song we performed. And so it was during that performance where it really hit me like, okay, this is really happening. But yeah, literally throughout the 14-hour period, every time there would be a break, like I'd have to go walk to the crypt to go get my coffee by myself. And you're like, oh my God, what was that person's life like? And they had a family and they had people that they loved. And so you're kind of having these like facing your own mortality moments pretty much all day. Mm-hmm. And so it also made me feel like a little bit like delicate about being down there and trying to be respectful of, just how immense the thought of like bringing bones down there and lining the walls and stacking them in an artful way, and then putting poetry in French about like, well, pretty much everyone dies. So
yeah,
there's, you just kind of have this feeling kind of the whole time you're there. Usually when you take a tour, it's maybe an hour or two, and that's probably enough for everybody. But right. Yeah, mm-hmm. I don't recommend being down there for much longer.
Okay. Well, yeah, I see what you mean about like that level of respect that you really want to have in that space, because there's a lot of weight to it.
Yeah.
And,
Sure.
Hearing like, oh, a rock and roll band is going into the catacombs, they're bringing their amps or something, you would think. And you guys just did such a brilliant job of like respecting the space, and it really came through in the video. It was absolutely stunning. And I was like emotionally pulled back, which I was not really expecting to feel that weight as, someone who's just watching it and not actually in there. But you did a fabulous job of, portraying that. And yeah, you should be really proud. And it's really cool.
I appreciate that. Thank you. And because you don't want to do something like this and have it come off flip or it is a huge thing that we are a part of. And I'm glad you said that it maybe got in touch with the emotions, because that's the whole point.
Yeah.
So thank you.
The Zone at 91.3.